As a Christian, are you expecting things to get darker and darker and darker and fall apart, and then Jesus come and just rescue us out of here? Or are you willing to take personal responsibility for the condition of the world around you and step into it carrying the influence of God to show people around you what godliness looks like until He return? I know way too many Christians that have just given up, just checked out. In our last presidential election, 30 million Christians in this country didn't vote. That's almost 10% of the population that are Christians that didn't vote. And as a Christian, I vote my values. I vote what I believe is the closest to biblical wisdom. And I'm not saying any one party has that and then the other party is demonic, as if there are only two parties anyway. I'm just saying we as believers, as Christians, need to not give up on the system. And as long as we're here, use our influence, which really is derived from the Spirit of God living within us, to shape culture, to influence and have the ear of those that govern us and affect what's going on in our country, not just giving up and checking out. Let me read something to you out of 1 Corinthians 15. I'm going to start in verse 22. This is Paul. He's talking about the resurrection. He's making a case for the resurrection of all people, which ultimately he gets to talking about the final judgment. And he's making the distinction. He said, look, as Christians, our hope is based on resurrection, specifically the resurrection of Jesus. So if there is no resurrection, then Jesus himself wasn't resurrected and our faith is hopeless. Then he goes into this. Verse 22, for as in Adam all die, so in Christ all will be made alive, but each in turn Christ the first fruits, then when he comes, those who belong to him. So those who belong to him are ultimately the ones that are made alive in him eternally. So then the end will come when he hands over the kingdom to God the Father after he has destroyed all dominion, authority, and power. So after he has destroyed all dominion, authority, and power, then comes the resurrection. We think the resurrection, then God destroys all dominion, authority, and power. It's flipped a little bit. Verse 24, again, then the end will come when he hands over the kingdom to God the Father after he has destroyed all dominion, authority, and power, for he must reign until he has put all enemies under his feet. The last enemy to be destroyed is death. So Jesus is to reign until the resurrection. And what's happening in his reign is the destruction of all dominion, authority, and power. Now, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. So as we know, as we see, especially in this election and what's going on in the world right now, we being believers are at war with an ideology that wants to tear everything about society down, which is ultimately a Luciferian or satanic idea, which Karl Marx picked up on, which shaped socialism and communism. And I'm really not trying to make a political statement. We do see one party trending more towards socialism and the other party wanting to preserve freedom in a sense. Again, I'm not trying to make a political statement, but I am recognizing what's happening in some of these parties. But think about this. A lot of Christians are waiting for God to show up and fix everything, or for the world to get darker and darker and darker. And so our eschatology has put us in a place where we just have given up on the world. We've given up on it, on the possibility of optimism and things getting better. We've given up on our capacity to influence culture. We think it's just getting darker and darker and darker, and then the world's going to hell, then Jesus is going to come in and swoop in and fix everything for us, maybe some bad years in the meantime. But no, what needs to happen is, what will happen, Christ reigns until the end. Well, how does he reign? Through you, through me, through his church, through his body in this earth. He is the head. His body is his church is his body in the earth. He's given us gifts. He's given us capacities, places of influence and leadership. Christ is reigning through his church in this earth until the end. See, a lot of us think that the world will end and then Christ will come and reign. Well, this passage here says that Christ will reign until the end. And he's destroying dominion, authority, and power as he's reigning up until the end. I think we can walk in our power as Christians, as carriers of the Spirit of the living God, and influence and shape culture. We shouldn't give up. We shouldn't be pessimistic. We shouldn't look at the world and think, oh, it's just not worth it. It's too big of a task. I've read the end of the book. It's all going to go to hell. Well, you know what? The book says that Christ is ruling and reigning until the end. How does he do that? Again, through you. See, we are citizens of heaven. We are ambassadors of the kingdom that wins, and that kingdom is real and it exists right now. And we are citizens of that kingdom. What needs to happen is we step down out of our citizenship of heaven into this world. We come out of what we are of, heaven, and into the world and vote and hold office and step into realms of influence, not to take over, but so that Christ will reign through us until the end. We're not going to bring about the end. We're not the ones that are going to somehow manifest and set up God's kingdom. He will do that. But until then, he's reigning because his kingdom has already won. His kingdom is already victorious. It's already gained all power and authority. But what's happening is in this realm, that victory is being declared. The dominance and the accomplishment of Christ in his death, burial, and resurrection is being declared by his church. Those strongholds are being torn down. Those rulers and dominions and darkness in the spiritual realm are being torn down as we walk in faith. We believers need to not give up, but step into our role as influencers from faith to influence culture, influence those that are governing, and just step into our authority. Again, not to take over, but by influence, mostly by walking in love, by reflecting godliness in our own hearts and our own lives, and not settling for those that are in office that will, make legislation against God's wisdom. If I could boil it all down to this idea, it's just don't give up. Don't check out. Vote. Again, 30 million Christians didn't vote in the last election. And it's not that elections are going to save us. That's just one way to exercise your influence as a carrier of the Spirit and the authority of God in this earth. Just one way is to get out and vote. The other is to stand up for God's righteousness. Tell people the truth. Give people wisdom. Don't just look at the world pessimistically, waiting for it all to fall apart. You matter. You are important. You are powerful because God lives in you. Do the hard thing. Take the responsibility to step into that realm of influence that God has for you, however great or small it might be, and stop checking out. Care. It's worth it. The hearts of people are at stake. We have the good news and we have the mandate to go into the world and shape culture with this victory that Christ has given us internally. I pray this is helpful for you. I'm passionate about this because not just because I love this country, but I love this planet and I see too many people giving up on it. Don't give up. It matters. People are starving for the gospel. Step into the power that God has given you and use your influence to show people how good God is. Love you guys. See you next time.